overwhelming evidence from all the opinion polls, which is the fact that it's going to be an absolute shoo-in for the Labour Party. So if he loses one here or there, whatevs. I mean, an interesting point of this is Scotland has come into the fore. It's interesting to note that in 2015, Scotland ceased to be a Labour heartland and the SNP swept the board. Now, the latest opinion poll suggests that's now on its head, and the Labour Party stands to gain perhaps as many as 40 more seats in Scotland. Also, there's quite interesting about the Red Wall, the 45 seats there. And we note that this controversy about whether Lord Frost, who negotiated Brexit, is to stand or not, but the opinion polls again tell us that there's quite widespread voter dissatisfaction, if not necessarily with Brexit, at least with the terms negotiated, i.e. by Lord Frost. And remember that Boris Johnson seduced these former Labour voters into the Tory fold on the basis of getting Brexit done. Could be that they'll go back. So we're looking at up to nearly 100 new seats slipping into Starmer's lap. Lucky old Starmer. Yeah, but
before you can't just brush off the Corbyn thing, because you have to remember, OK, you can say, oh, it's only one seat here or there, but he was the Labour Party leader that Sir Keir Starmer endorsed twice to be Prime Minister, and suddenly he's been swept out into the cold. Is this an indication of yet more dramatic U-turns and flip-flopping, or is it a case of here's a leader who's actually getting the party finally in order?
Here is a leader who has moved on, and very significantly, and suddenly I find myself thinking about Michael Foot and the SDP. You remember, he was that great left-wing socialist, and the SDP said, well, up for this will not put, or the SDP, the Gang of Four, you may remember. And so they flipped over and started a new party. Didn't, in fact, a lot of good it did them in the end, but nonetheless, that point is worth making. And indeed, I have to say that if any of the opinion polls are anything like right, we are looking at an utterly decimated Tory party come July the 5th. And one wonders to what extent they might start thinking, look, we have such an ideological schism. Maybe now is the moment to fess up that we don't really function as a single party, and there could indeed even be a split. I mean, look, they trade as a broad church, but frankly, these days it is looking about as comfortable as that temple cited in the Bible after Samson had done his stuff and ripped it apart.
Excellent stuff, as ever there. Biblical end to your interview there, Peter Spencer, as ever, pretty in pink in your kitchen there. Thanks for joining us, always an absolute delight. Now, we will, of course, have lots more on the election campaign throughout the show. And I'll be joined live by a Cabinet Minister, a member of the Shadow Cabinet, and the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. So stick around for all of that. We've got tons coming up, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, which you've helped to make the fastest growing national news website in the country. So thank you very much. Now, brace yourselves, because it's the Great British Giveaway, your chance to win £20,000 in cash, tax-free, in time for the summer. What would you spend that Wonga on? A dream holiday, perhaps? Get the garden done, or perhaps even treat the family? Well, you have to hurry up, as time is ticking out on your chance to make it all yours, and here's how.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, some grim news on the migrant front for Rishi Sunak today, because GB News can reveal that more than 10,000 migrants have now crossed the Channel this year alone. We'll be in Dover to report on that soon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The most sexiest man in the UK at the moment, as voted for by a dating website, is that man on your screen, Jeremy Clarkson. I'm sorry, Peter, I know he's a man of a certain age, but I'm not getting this one.
Are you not?
No.
This is another reason for an old wrinkly like me to be deeply joyous. Hope springs eternal. He's grey-haired, he's balding, he's got a bit of a pot belly, he's quite tall. You know, I reckon I might be in with half a shower.
As long as only hope springing eternal, love. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of guys watching this will really be a bit befuddled as to how he's the sexiest guy. I think it's a sympathy vote.
No, I get it. I understand it.
But he's got a sense of humour, and he's got plenty of money.
But what's there to understand? How is he the sexiest
because
man?
I'll tell you why. Because he's and I say this as a bloke, he's a man's man. He gets stuck in, he's involved, he's practical, he's physical.
Does that make him
funny?
Sexy, though?
He's got money. I think men these days, if you ask me, too effeminate. And women don't want that. Women, well, I don't know
what do women want? Go on, just mansplain to me what women want. Go on,
tell us,
thank you very much. No, this is voted for by it's an illicit dating website, OK?
Oh, is it an affairs website?
Married women. But Idris Elba came third.
I just think Jez he's a man's man. Like I said, he's physical, he gets involved, he likes a beer, he's got plenty of money. How much did he get for the farm on Amazon?
That's so silly. So you're implying women only go for men with money?
Well, no, but I mean...
He did, didn't he? Just said that, yeah. He's got plenty of money, so he's sexy.
It's normal for women to want to be with a man who can look after them, no?
No. Will you stop mansplaining what women want?
My mum had an expression, Ben. She said, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. But trust me, if Idris Elba gets himself a pair of wellies, he'll be second next year.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:22. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll discuss a story that has appalled me. It turns out that more than 2/3 of boozers and bars are giving us short measures. This must stop. Now, moving on, immigration is also a major talking point in this general election campaign, of course. And GB News can exclusively reveal today that more than 10,000 Channel migrants have now crossed illegally to the UK so far this year alone. And this grim milestone figure was reached today after another 154 people arrived at Dover in 3 small boats this morning. Let's cross live now to Dover and speak to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. A grim tally finally been achieved. Tell us more.
Yes, indeed, Martin. We got word from our sources that we were likely to pass the 10,000 mark today, so we duly came down to Dover, and sure enough, 3 small boats were pushed off from France early this morning. The first one just after dawn, spotted in the English Channel. The Dover lifeboat picked up 43 migrants and took them here to the Border Force Processing Centre at Dover Harbour. Then just a couple of hours after that, another small boat was intercepted and 45 people taken here to Dover. And then the final boat so far today was picked up just before lunchtime with 66 people on board, a total of 154 that have arrived so far today, taking that tally to 10,036 for the year so far. It is a landmark figure, there is no doubt, and we've achieved that figure a whole month earlier than we did last year. It was well into June before we crossed the 10,000 mark. And so while the government was able, Martin, last year to trumpet the fact that small boat arrivals were down some 36% over the year, and they claimed that was down to their stop the boats policy, this year there has been a total reversal of that situation. And one of the advantages, I think, for Rishi Sunak in going ahead with that election on the 4th of July is that he will not have to suffer the surge during the summer months when on a flat cam day, as you well know, Martin, more than 1,000 migrants can come across on a single day. I think it would be very difficult for him to go to the electorate to try to sell the fact that the government stop the boats policy was working if we had another bumper year, and that's what's being predicted by Border Force officials.
And Mark White, you called it very early on when the election was called the other day, and that is Rishi Sunak simply cannot stop the boats. He can stop the boats no more than you can flap your arms there and fly to Calais. Do you think he'll realise that this was a statement he could never deliver on, and that's why just best to go to the nation early and just try and get this over and done with?
Well, it's very tempting, isn't it, for politicians to make these bold claims 3 or 4 years out from an election. But as that election cycle grows ever nearer, then you have to make good on that promise. And clearly that was always going to be very, very difficult for the Prime Minister to do, because as we know, as keen watchers of what happens out in the marine environment in the English Channel, it's on the days when the weather conditions improve, the boats come as sure as night follows day. These boats come when the weather conditions improve. And if you have a great year of weather conditions prevailing for the most part, you have a bumper year, as you did in 2022. It was pretty iffy for a large part of the year last year, which meant we had that dip in the number of migrants coming. But this year again, so far, there have been some pretty good days. And with, of course, the summer months coming, we're expecting even more to come across. The interesting thing, of course, will be, Martin, to see exactly what Labour do if they do get into power, because the absolute headache that Rishi Sunak and his cabinet have had to deal with in thousands of migrants coming across that English Channel will then be on the lap of Sir Keir Starmer and his government. Is the promised hundreds of extra law enforcement officers for the National Crime Agency going to make all that difference at the end of the day? Is the plan to process asylum seeker applications more quickly going to make all that difference at the end of the day? Perhaps, but it's going to be a difficult year ahead for whoever gets into office on July the 5th.
Thank you, Mark White. Excellent update there, live from Dover, as ever. And we'll come back to you later in the show for more. Thank you very much. Now, for more on this topic, I'm joined in the studio by Alp Mehmet, who's the chairman, of course, of Migration Watch. Thank you for joining us in the studio. A grim tally, 10,000 has been breached. And do you think, at current reckoning, Alp, we're on track for some kind of record here?
Oh, yeah. Well, without a doubt. Not only are we ahead of where we were that last year, but where we were at this point in the year before, 22, when we had 45,000 more than 45,000 coming in. We are heading towards 50, 60,000 at this rate. And guess what? What Rishi Sunak tried to avoid by going earlier, as Mark implied, that's all going to happen in the middle of an election campaign now. I think it's not only is our numbers going to go up, but what is particularly depressing is that there's no likelihood of anyone actually getting a grip, whether it's Labour getting into office or the Tories coming back. So long as the numbers that are getting into the EU now are able to make their way across Europe and to the shores of Calais, then I'm afraid numbers will keep going up because no one's going to send them back.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next point, Alp. The Rwanda bill was meant to be the big deterrent. They're meant to be the line in the sand. Astonishingly, yesterday, on the very first day of the general election trail, Rishi Sunak admitted there won't be a single flight taking off before the general election. What message does that send out to the people traffickers?
Well, this message it sends to me is that Rishi Sunak suddenly decided, oh dear, this was a mistake. Let's try and make the best and most of it. There was never any chance of the Rwanda plan, the Rwanda scheme actually working. Once they failed to introduce, in the first instance, and bear in mind we had 3 pieces of legislation, what they should have done was passed the final bit of legislation, which should have included some sort of repealing or overseeing the Human Rights Act. The fact that they didn't, and the fact that they weren't prepared to detain and deal with quickly and remove, and that was never going to happen, it meant that Rwanda was never going to work anyway.
Can I ask you a very quick question? Chris Hope, our political editor, is on the campaign trail with Rishi Sunak. He asked him specifically today, would you withdraw from the ECHR? And he said, you'll have to wait until the manifesto. Do you think that Rishi Sunak's got the guts to put that in the manifesto pledge? And if so, do you think the British people would go for it?
No, I don't think they will. But I think we should be careful as well. Pulling out of the ECHR in itself won't be the magic wand. There are other things that need to happen as well. And I just don't think that Rishi Sunak or any other politician has either the guts or the will, frankly, to introduce the necessary legislation to do that.
OK, Outman, always a pleasure to talk to you. And we'll be joined by an immigration lawyer in the next hour for his take on this story that's captivating the nation now. Loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. In a few minutes, I'll take a close look at another one of the big elections talking points, and that is this. The Tories and Labour today clash on energy policy and the prospect of cheaper household bills. Get on with it, please. First, here's your latest news headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Cheers, Martin. 3:31, our top stories. The Prime Minister says the lowering of the energy price cap shows his plan is working, as both Labour and the Conservatives look to make it an electoral dividing line. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland and claimed the economy has turned a corner. He also criticised the cost of Labour's net zero pledges and said that he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today, we've had the news that energy bills are falling again, and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Well, Labour has confirmed it will pass the smoking ban if the party enters office, with the Conservatives having run out of time to get it through Parliament. The Labour leader has been campaigning in Scotland today, where he's pledged to bring down energy costs with a new publicly owned green power company. Labour's hoping to win dozens of seats in Scotland after years of dominance by the SNP. Well, GB News can exclusively reveal that more than 10,000 migrants have illegally crossed the Channel to the UK so far this year. It's a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning after he promised that his government would stop the boats. And finally, the documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film Super Size Me in 2004, which tracked his health while he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. The film was credited with prompting a broad conversation about how fast food and rising obesity was impacting society. Mr. Spurlock passed away in New York due to complications from cancer. Well, if you'd like all the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
OK, let's take a look at the financial markets today. The pound will buy you $1.2725 and €1.1733. Price of gold, £1,836.82 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,321 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Ray. Now, we've got loads more coverage on the general election campaign, of course, coming up in just a few minutes' time. And I'll get reaction to the shock news that Boris Johnson ally David Frost has allegedly been banned from standing as a Tory candidate. So that Rishi Sunak is denying that. But first, there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Queues for the M1 in a couple of locations on the northbound side. Firstly, Ossett at 40 to Cargate Junction 41, 2 lanes are coned off and queues due to a collision. The earlier collision northbound just after 29A Bolsover is cleared, but still very slow back to Junction 28. It's in the roadworks, of course. It also means queues on the southbound side as well. 2 lanes were closed southbound on the M6 at the Croft interchange, Junction 21A, where it meets the M62. So that breakdown's now cleared, but congestion hasn't. Queues east away from Swansea on the M4 on towards the Britain Ferry Bridge, Junction 42. Lane 1's out at the scene of a bump there, queuing back to Junction 45. And the anti-clock M25 at Enfield 25. The exit slip road is closed. Long delays before Waltham Abbey at 26. There's a breakdown there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling them like that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And, so, you know, Gareth, speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh Government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it's puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And
you know what? If I was Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:38. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, across live to a pub after the shocking and frankly grotesque news that more than 2/3 of beer and wine served in British boozers is being served up, short measured. We must stamp this out. Now, before that, the average household could be more than £120 better off each year from July. And that's because Ofgem has lowered its price cap by 7%. And this comes as energy becomes the first battleground on the general election campaign, with Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer pledging cheaper gas and electricity bills for voters. Well, they would, wouldn't they? Well, GB News' business and economics editor Liam Halligan joins me now with On the Money. Liam, it's always a great Friday when you rock up to the studio. Let's talk
Drag myself out of the pub, come and talk to you.
You get your measure. Now, talking of which, now, sure, energy bills are something everybody cares about and politicians know it, but tell us first about the price cuts and why it's good news before we get into the politics.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, no one ever asked me about energy bills or electricity generation. It was all kind of nerdsville. No, you know, it was the kind of thing that I wanged on about in newsrooms and nobody was interested in. But now energy prices are utility bills, gas and electricity, front and centre of the cost of living crisis and front and centre of this election campaign. What's happened today is that Ofgem, which is the energy regulator, they've announced their new price cap for the 3-year period from July, including August and September. The last price cap came in April. And that price cap is meant to limit the extent to which your household bill can go up. Not the total bill, because, of course, you use more electricity and gas, you pay more. It's about limiting the unit cost of gas and electricity. And then we look at the average household's use and we use that unit cost to work out the average bill. So here are the scores on the doors. Let me show you the numbers. Now, the average gas and electricity bill, according to Ofgem, will be £1,569.8 a year. That's combined gas and electricity from July. That's down 7% on the current Ofgem energy price cap, and that's a saving per household of £122 a year on average. But hold on to your horses, because after the summer, when the weather gets colder, when geopolitical angst between Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East could crank up again, the Ofgem energy price cap is likely to go up again in October. So that's October, November, December. And let's just get this in context. I've just told you that the average bill will be just over 1,500 quid from July. Before the war in Ukraine, so back in early 2022, before Putin's invasion in February 2022, the average bill, combined gas and electricity, was just over £1,000, £1,084. So even at this lower Ofgem energy price cap, bills are still 50% higher than they were at the beginning of 2022. And I can't see that changing.
And that brings us to the political solutions that the two parties are offering up. The Tories, Claire Coutinho, seems to have suddenly woken up that green taxes are a bad idea. And the Labour Party, meanwhile, have something called the Great British Energy Plan. Tell us where you think the sense lies between those two approaches.
OK, well, it's hard to tell because they're both so vague. I mean, Labour's plan is literally a slogan. I know nothing more about it than that.
The Great British Bake Off?
Very, very little has been published by Labour. I mean, to be fair to them, the election's just been called, but this is a key thing and it's going to be very technical. And those of us in the press who follow such things should have a chance to look at it and then explain it objectively to a broader audience. Look, let's take the Tories. We've been calling here on GB News for a long time that it's unfair if energy subsidies to the renewable companies to build their wind farms, to build their solar farms, if they're paid out of electricity and gas bills, because that's disproportionately falling on the poor, who pay more as a share of their income on gas and electricity than wealthier households. There's a bigger share, same with food. So I think that's unfair. It should come out of general taxation if they're subsidised at all. You know, if it stacks up in a business sense, why does it need to be subsidised, all this green energy? That's one thing. So the Tories are now saying, just as the election's called, oh, we're going to get rid of these subsidies on your electricity bill for green energy. You know, I'll believe that when I see it, to be honest with you. I think that's just an election wheeze by the Tories. But then Labour, they're saying they want this Great British Energy Company. OK, and that's a slogan. I don't know what they're talking about beyond that because no proper information has been published, so we'll have to see. I imagine what Labour are trying to do is trying to say that just with the railways, if we nationalise it, if we make the state more involved, then it will be kind of cuddlier and better. And the reason a lot of voters might go for that is because they're young, because they don't remember what you and I remember, Martin, about the 70s and the 80s when you had state-run organisations. Look, private sector trains, they're not perfect, they're often awful, but they're a lot better than they were when it was British Rail, and there was absolutely no incentive by anyone in the company to actually make for a decent service because it was state-run. Look, these are big ideological battles. I see lots of broad brush political strokes and very little policy detail, and I have to say, Martin, I think it's going to stay that way for a lot of this campaign. It will be all about slogans rather than actual details that we can get into, examine and properly hold the respective parties to account.
Great stuff, Liam Halligan, always full of energy, and you've deserved the pint after that. And if I was a landlord, I wouldn't short measure you. Superb stuff, as ever, Liam Halligan. Now, moving on, could the England football team play a decisive role in who wins the next general election? Well, it's not as far-fetched as it sounds. I'll have all the details after this. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay rather cloudy, and it's going to be quite a cold night tonight as well, particularly compared to recent nights. Drizzly rain is going to continue across northern areas. That's because low pressure is still nearby and a weather front, but through this evening that low pressure will gradually shift north and westwards, taking with it that cloudier and slightly wetter weather and introducing much clearer weather. The clearer skies from the south this afternoon will spread northwards, and that will allow for temperatures to dip down into single figures, possibly low single figures across southern counties. There could also be some mist and fog around as well first thing, but also quite a good deal of sunshine as well. Saturday is looking like the driest day of the weekend and the warmest one as well. So fairly bright start across the far north of Scotland. Still some lingering rain across the northwest and the southwest probably, but for most of us it should be dry, if not a bit cloudy, across northern areas. Across northern England, much of Wales and England, it should be a bright start. Temperatures will pick up quite quickly as the sun comes up, so you'll be into double digits at least by around 8 o'clock, and there'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning. That mist and fog should clear quite quickly. There's a potential for a few showers to develop, particularly across northern areas of England. Parts of Scotland as well could see some heavier showers on Saturday, but most of us should stay dry, and there's just a chance of some rain clipping the far southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees in the south into the high teens across the north. But there is a bit of a change on the way for Sunday, as this area of rain from the southwest will push northeastwards through the night, bringing a spell of wet weather. And once it does clear through, we will see plenty of showers breaking out across the country through Sunday and Monday. These could be quite heavy, possibly thundery, so it's going to turn much more unsettled and a little bit cooler for the rest of the weekend.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 3:48. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, 4 o'clock, I'll have all the day's big election news as the Bionic MP, Craig McKinley, announces he will bow out as an MP. But before that, Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has been campaigning in Eastbourne today. It's one of the many seats his party is hoping to take from the Conservatives in the south of England. And here's what he had to say to the media earlier.
Here in Eastbourne, we're really hopeful of taking this seat back. It's clear a real close battle between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives, but it's replicated across the south of England, on the coast, in places like Chichester and Lewis, where we're really challenging the Conservatives, but across Kent and Sussex and Surrey and Hampshire and frankly all over the south east and south west. It's the Liberal Democrats who are the challengers to the Conservatives, and we're seeing the Conservatives running scared. Today we heard John Redwood not standing again. I think he knows that the Liberal Democrats will beat him in Wokingham.
We've seen Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer sort of fan out across the UK instantly. Are we going to expect you to stick to the southeast of England, southeast and southwest, where you've got the best chance?
No, I'm going to go across the country as well. You're right, we've been in Surrey the first day, then in Cheltenham, and now here on the south coast, seeing some of our best target seats, but we've got some great target seats in Scotland. We've got great target seats in the north, from Manchester to Yorkshire. So it'll be across the country a campaign for the Liberal Democrats. But you're right to say that in the south of England there are so many seats that have been traditionally Conservative that the Liberal Democrats are the ones who can take off them. And increasingly in the southwest, the West Country, which used to be a stronghold for the Liberal Democrats, we're back there again. We've seen that in the by-election victories in Somerset and Devon. We've seen that in council victories this year in Dorset, last year in Devon, the previous year in Somerset. So across the south of England, I think people realise now if they want to get rid of the Conservatives, they vote Liberal Democrat.
If you do end up picking up these seats off the Tories, you may put Labour in a position where they don't have enough seats to form a government. What is your message to voters about whether you will go into coalition with Labour? You've already ruled one out with the Tories.
Well, Liberal Democrats certainly won't prep up the Conservatives. They need to leave government. They're out of ideas, out of excuses, out of time, and they need to be out of office. They've undermined our country. But Liberal Democrats have a set of really positive ideas. We call it our fair deal for people. People who've been working hard, paying their taxes, playing by the rules, looking after loved ones, who just had a really tough time under the Conservatives. And I want to put the Liberal Democrat ideas there, because I think our ideas are fresh. I think they would transform our country and actually transform our politics. We're very different from any other party.
Notice you don't want to talk about a coalition with Labour.
Well, I'm talking about this election campaign. When I'm knocking on doors, what people say to me and say to other Liberal Democrat canvassers, what are you going to do about the health service in our local area? What are you going to do about the problem of the water company pumping their filthy sewage onto our beaches, into our rivers? What are you going to do about the cost of living? And we are going to focus on that. I make no apology for that. It's an election campaign, and I want to tell people what Liberal Democrats stand for.
Now, with all the talk about the election, there's one interesting factor that I want to look at now. And could Gareth Southgate and his England team play a decisive role in who ends up in Downing Street? Well, in 1970, England were knocked out of the World Cup just 4 days before Labour and Harold Wilson were beaten by Edward Heath's Conservative Party. So with the general election taking place 10 days ahead of the Euro 2024 final, could a good run for Southgate's side help Rishi Sunak win on July the 4th? Well, I'm joined now by the sports journalist Ben Jacobs. Ben, welcome to the show. Always a delight. This is a fascinating story. It's based on some actual proper research from Stanford University that shows some interesting stuff. Talk us through it.
Yeah, this was back in 1970 when Edward Heath's Conservatives were tipped to knock Harold Wilson out of Downing Street. And there was a feeling back then that England and football had an influence on the election, because England played a quarterfinal against West Germany in 1970 in Mexico, and that was just 4 days before the poll, and they disappointed, and it seemingly created a situation where the mood of the country turned and impacted the election. And interestingly, the same theory was actually there in 1966 when England won the World Cup. The only difference is that one's a myth, because there was about 3 weeks difference. There was 31st of March, and then there was the 17th of July. So a bigger gap between campaigning, election, and 1966 World Cup final. But in 1970, they were so close together that there was genuinely a feeling at that time that football influenced politics.
And Ben, this research shows that the incumbent party gets a 1.6% vote shift uplift if a team does well. Interestingly, July the 4th is the election. July the 5th and the 6th is the quarter-final, which England are most likely going to make. There could be something in this.
There could be. As you say, we don't want to jinx England because, first of all, they've got their 3 group games against Serbia, Denmark and Slovenia. But then if they're still playing, you've got buzz, you've got feel-good factor, and that is something that the incumbent would usually be able to dine off. Alternatively, if people are sad, they don't like their football, they don't like their lives, they don't like the fact maybe they've forked out money watching the football, travelling, they come back, election comes, they want a change. So logically, an incumbent would get an advantage through inadvertent things such as a big football event.
Right, we have to leave it there. Ben Jacobs, Rishi Sunak will no doubt be hoping for any driftwood. Can he say it was Southgate what won it? Now, 76 Tory MPs will not fight the next general election. And that beats now the record of 75 that was set in 1997. All the Tories heading for a Blair-style wipeout. I'm Martin Daubney, GB News. It's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay rather cloudy, and it's going to be quite a cold night tonight as well, particularly compared to recent nights. Drizzly rain is going to continue across northern areas. That's because low pressure is still nearby and a weather front, but through this evening that low pressure will gradually shift north and westwards, taking with it that cloudier and slightly wetter weather and introducing much clearer weather. The clearer skies from the south this afternoon will spread northwards, and that will allow for temperatures to dip down into single figures, possibly low single figures across southern counties. There could also be some mist and fog around as well first thing, but also quite a good deal of sunshine as well. Saturday is looking like the driest day of the weekend and the warmest one as well. So fairly bright start across the far north of Scotland. Still some lingering rain across the northwest and the southwest probably, but for most of us it should be dry, if not a bit cloudy, across northern areas. Across northern England, much of Wales and England, it should be a bright start. Temperatures will pick up quite quickly as the sun comes up, so you'll be into double digits at least by around 8 o'clock, and there'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning. That mist and fog should clear quite quickly. There's a potential for a few showers to develop, particularly across northern areas of England. Parts of Scotland as well could see some heavier showers on Saturday, but most of us should stay dry, and there's just a chance of some rain clipping the far southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees in the south into the high teens across the north. But there is a bit of a change on the way for Sunday, as this area of rain from the southwest will push northeastwards through the night, bringing a spell of wet weather. And once it does clear through, we will see plenty of showers breaking out across the country through Sunday and Monday. These could be quite heavy, possibly thundery, so it's going to turn much more unsettled and a little bit cooler for the rest of the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Queues for the M1 northbound, firstly from Ossett Junction 40 up to Cargate 41. Takes about 15 minutes or so to get through at the moment. A collision is being recovered. 2 lanes coned off a 3-mile tailback. Big queues to northbound for a previous bump now on the hard shoulder. It's just before the M18 interchange. That's Junction 32. It's queuing back to Hucknall 27 for the best part of an hour. Queuing away from Swansea in South Wales for the eastbound M4. Junction 45 on Vaughan, heading down towards Bagland 41, not helped by a previous collision there. Northbound M11 struggling up to the M25 at 6, queuing back to Loughton from an earlier collision. And long delays for the earlier breakdown clockwise M25, Leatherhead at 9 to Wisley at 10, but again, all lanes are back open. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hey, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, with Sir John Redwood and Baronic MP Craig McKinley, the latest Tories to bow out of the election, the Conservative exodus is now 76, surpassing the grim record of 1997. And does this signify a Blair-style wipeout for Rishi Sunak's Conservatives? Next, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has dramatically announced that he will stand as an independent in Islington North, leaving Sir Keir Starmer no choice but to finally boot him out of the party. Now, yesterday, Reform's honorary president Nigel Farage dramatically stood down after Rishi Sunak outmanoeuvred him by calling a snap election, with their talisman heading to help Trump. Is the party over for Reform? Well, I'll be joined by their leader, Richard Tice. And there's also the rest of the day's news away from the general election as well. And in the past few hours, the 10,000th small boat migrant to arrive this year alone has landed in Britain. That's all coming now, between now and 4 o'clock. And we've got some breaking news for you in the last few minutes. And there's a big pro-Palestine protest at the last election event that Rishi Sunak is at today. Protesters are chanting "Free, free Palestine." We'll have lots more on that breaking story as we get it. And as usual, I'd love to hear from you. There's a new way to do that. Send your views and post your comments by going to gbnews.com/your say. Before all of that, it's time for your latest headlines, and it's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. 1 minute past 4. Our top stories. The Prime Minister says the lowering of the energy price cap shows his plan is working, as both Labour and the Conservatives look to make it an electoral dividing line. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland and claimed the economy has turned a corner. He criticised the cost of Labour's net zero pledges and says he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today, we've had the news that energy bills are falling again, and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Labour has ruled out any deals with the SNP after the election, even in the event of a hung parliament. Sir Keir Starmer has been campaigning in the east of Glasgow today, which is one of the seats that he's hoping to take from John Swinney's party in July's election. Sir Keir said the SNP's only ambition is to break up the UK and there would be absolutely no deal with the Scottish nationalists. Jeremy Corbyn has confirmed that he'll stand as an independent candidate in the general election against the party that he once led. As a result, he's automatically been expelled as a member of Labour, which suspended him in 2020 over his claims that complaints of anti-Semitism in the party had been dramatically overstated. The former Labour leader says he'll run as a voice for equality, democracy and peace. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said he's not worried about Corbyn's popularity in Islington North, which he's represented since 1983.
Jeremy Corbyn will make his own decisions. I think he's standing as an independent. That's his choice. We will have an excellent Labour candidate in Islington North, as we've got excellent Labour candidates across the country. And the choice at this election is absolutely clear. We've had 14 years of chaos and decline under this Tory government. We cannot have more of that.
GB News can reveal that more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the United Kingdom so far this year. The milestone figure was reached today after another 154 arrived in Dover, having crossed in 3 small boats this morning. It's a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning after he promised that his government would stop the boats. The former boss of the Post Office has been accused of living in, quote, la-la land over her role in the Horizon scandal. Paula Venables again became emotional on her third day of giving evidence. She admitted making mistakes and accepted that there was no one else to blame, but claimed that she didn't know why important information hadn't reached her. Sam Stein KC described that as absolute rubbish and suggested that Ms Venables had failed to ask the right questions because the risk was too great.
I worked as hard as I possibly could to deliver the best post office for the UK. It would have been wonderful to have 30,000 post office branches. That would have been the best outcome ever, to have had more post offices in more communities. What I failed to do, and I have made this clear previously, is I did not recognise and it's been discussed across the inquiry, the imbalance of power between the institution and the individual, and I let these people down.
Theresa May has urged Tory MPs to fight to re-elect a Conservative government in her farewell speech in Parliament. The MP for Maidenhead, who served as Prime Minister between 2016 and 2019, said it would be a great wrench to leave the Commons after 27 years. Her departure comes as 76 Tory MPs stepped down, which is more than the number of those who left back in 1997. The documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film Super Size Me in 2004, which tracked his health while he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. The film was credited with prompting a broad conversation about how fast food and rising obesity was impacting society. Mr. Spurlock passed away in New York due to complications from cancer. For all the top stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, straight back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. Now, we start this hour with some big breaking news. And there's a big pro-Palestine protest at the last election event that Rishi Sunak is attending today. Protesters are chanting free Palestine, and we'll have more on that breaking story as we get it. Now, moving on, because earlier Mr Sunak said he was pumped up and enjoying himself on this election tour. However, the satirists have been out in force after the PM and Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris spoke to the media outside the Titanic Museum, prompting an influx, of course, of sinking ships and rearranging the deck chair comparisons online. And a grim tally has now been reached because a record 76 Tory MPs have now said that they will not fight at the election on July the 4th. And Labour, meanwhile, has had its own battles after expelling Jeremy Corbyn from the party for running as an independent. And meanwhile, Reform UK are yet to unify on the role of Nigel Farage. Well, to discuss all this, I'm now joined in the studio by the political editor at The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikalova. Welcome to the studio. Delighted to have your company. Let's start with this grim tally. 76 has been achieved. 4 today. Started off with Sir John Redwood. Then, of course, it was Craig McKinley, who bravely returned to Parliament just this week. Then it was Greg Clark, and now recently Sir David Evans. Bexley Heath, a very safe, healthy majority. This is now looking more and more like a 97 repeat. And the next question is, does that mean we're heading for a Blair-style wipeout?
Well, I think, look, I mean, in some respect, at this stage in the political cycle, it's no surprise that some MPs want to stand down. They've had they've been there for a long time. But as you say, it's the surprising names. I mean, people like Hugh Merriman, for example, who would have been a rising star in any other context. I think two things are happening. One, you've got Rishi Sunak so far behind in the polls, but also a real problem of party management. Yeah. So, there've been so many complaints from the parliamentary party that number 10 for so long just hasn't been listening to them, hasn't been reaching out to them properly. There are allegations about Sunak and the timing of this election that he just doesn't care about the party, is willing to take them to Armageddon. And I think all of that feeds in to this element of exodus. I mean, there are a lot of MPs who are saying, well, why do we want to stick around? And some surprising names there. Sir John Redwood, I mean... Well, that's a historic one, sort of. He's of the Thatcher era, and he's been around for so long. So, yeah, you're losing a lot of grandees, and I think the big question is, what is the party going to look like after the election? However many seats they win, and this is what every single potential rival who's gearing up to replace Rishi Sunak, assuming he loses, is trying to do. They're all meeting candidates. They're all reaching out to associations, trying to shape the future of the party. And that brings me neatly to my next question. Earlier on today, we heard the rumour that Frosty had been frozen out. Lord Frost, of course, Mr Brexit, the great Frost, as Boris Johnson called him. Of course, he's in the Lords, but you know for yourself, he's wanted to stand as an MP. Earlier on today, we heard that as being blocked. 93 vacant seats. His name wasn't on it. Rishi Sunak said today on the campaign trail that's not the case. But he's precisely the kind of red wall, Brexity, red meat Conservatives a lot on the right would like to see winning a seat to give them a foothold to rebuild the party. Is there the rumour, persistent rumour, that people like him are being frozen out of the party? Well, this is certainly a concern. David Frost, there are so many people who want him to be an MP, so many people who see him as a potential future leader even of the party just because he is a heavyweight, he has this already background in government, and he has a lot of respect from people in certain wings of the party. But, yes, he has been trying to get a seat and it looks like he hasn't got it. I don't think he has been blocked, as Sunak says, but certainly they haven't made it easy for him, I think is probably the accurate way to put it. If they wanted to, they would have made him a candidate. For him, it's a big gamble giving up a seat in the Lords. So he effectively has to know for sure that an association will say yes to him. He can't just be presented as a bog-standard candidate, which is understandable. And it sounds like Downing Street just doesn't really have an interest in making that happen. And it's worth, Anna, just talking people through the process. So he currently is in the Lords. Yes. He would need to surrender that position with the guarantee of being selected as a candidate, and then he would still need to get elected to get in. So it'd be a big outlay from him, but it's one that, as you understand it, he's prepared to do and he wants to do. My understanding is that, yes, whether or not he has taken the personal decision that this is not the right time as well, because there are a lot of people who want to run, but they're looking at, just like the people who are leaving, they're looking at the current state of the polls, they're looking at the state of morale in the party and thinking, well, maybe I'll hold fire and wait. And that brings us to the next question. We're talking about Bexley Heath there. Majority of only 12,500. It's been a Tory seat since 2005. David Evans stood since 97. He knows what it's like to lose to Blair. Is there any such thing now as a safe Conservative seat? Well, I mean, that's what everyone says. There is no such thing as a safe seat. Of course, there are going to be safe seats, and of course, there are seats where the vote will be split between Labour and Liberal Democrats, or where Reform won't quite have a stronghold. I think one of the reasons that Rishi Sunak has chosen July is because he thinks that reform wasn't quite ready yet.
Yeah.
So it's a tactical move there. So. But no, I mean, and the problem is what decision is going to be made to actually what seats is the Conservative Party going to focus on right now in defending?
Can I ask you about the Reform Party? We've got the leader of Reform, Richard Tice, who'll be in your seat there in about an hour's time. Do you think that Rishi Sunak has outmanoeuvred the party? Nigel Farage admitted that very thing last night. 6 weeks, not enough time for a small party to hit the ground and have a serious chance. Do you think the party's over for reform? Do you think Rishi Sunak called the election? Everyone was scratching their heads on Wednesday. Why has he gone so early? Was it to cook the goose of Richard Tice?
I think it is. I mean, I know from speaking to people around Sunak that was one of the calculations. Whether or not reform would realistically have had much of a change in their fortunes in the next few, given it 3 months more.
But they could have taken a lot more. They could have done a lot more damage, and therefore made the remaining Conservative Party after the election much more burnt to the ground.
I think the issue is more the single issue that reform focuses on, which is immigration. So if they had waited till the autumn, what you would have done is you would have seen a lot more people come over, some more votes. So that would have, of course, given Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson ammunition to hit the Conservatives where it hurts. So I think in that sense, yes. But of course, as a small new party in this effectively two-party system, it's always going to be very hard for a small challenger to come along and make a big dent.
And it's an election trail. It's an election that Rishi Sunak called. He didn't have to call it. It's been called the greatest gamble of his entire political career. Some are calling it a suicide mission. Anna, what's the mood like within the Conservative ranks at the moment? Is it the last days of the empire?
Well, look,
feeling?
I've been in Parliament the last 2 days, and the mood in Parliament is sort of a little bit sad for a lot of Tory MPs, just because even the ones who knew they were going they basically thought they had guarantees that they would have another couple of months. So it's that human element of they haven't had a chance to say goodbye. They're not going to have a chance to, most of them, make a last statement in the Commons. And a lot of MPs are absolutely mutinous. The Red Wall MPs feel they've been abandoned. And I think that there's a perception that perhaps Downing Street does not care so much about the handling of those elements in the party.
Anna, I spend a lot of time looking at what people say on the comments on newspaper articles, on the Mail on Sunday, the Telegraph, GB News on your say. I sense amongst your readers there is a lot of anger with the Conservative Party. There is a feeling that they had an 80-seat majority, seems so long ago now, doesn't it? And they have squandered it. Do you think that's fair to say?
Well, I mean, I remember when they got the majority, everyone thought that politics would be back to normal after the years of upheaval with Theresa May and everything post the Brexit vote. Instead, we had COVID. There's a lot that can be said for mismanagement in the Conservative Party, but also there was this absolute shock that came along 2 months into Boris Johnson's majority term. And I think any government with any majority would have struggled to deal with that.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. That's the Deputy Political Editor at the Mail on Sunday, Anna Michelova. Please come back and join us again. Really enjoyed that. Now, we, of course, have lots more on the election campaign throughout the show, and I'll be joined live by a Cabinet Minister and member of the Shadow Cabinet, and also by the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. And, of course, we'll have loads more on those pro-Palestine protesters who have recently targeted Rishi Sunak on the campaign trail this afternoon. And there's plenty of coverage on all of that on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country. So thank you very much. Now, it's time now for our giveaway, and it's the biggest cash prize we've ever given away, £20,000 tax-free. You can spend however you'd like. It's totally tax-free, of course, so you see every single last penny of it. But you have to hurry up and get your entry in as time is ticking on your chance to bag the lot. And here's how you could do that.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking? Not a line, what is it? I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me. This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, some bad news on the migrant front again for Rishi Sunak today, because GB News can reveal that more than 10,000 migrants have now crossed the Channel this year alone. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed for boys. List is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George. Then it goes Olivia. Then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1. Then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was. And I did put Dawn in. It's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not
Wow.
Full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Hans, what do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting is people that do double barrel because they can't decide, and you know, a lot of people do that, and that's a bit difficult because I think you should just pick a name. You know.
I tell you names that are falling down the list though: Harry and Meghan.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Nigel Farage, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 4:22. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Later in the show, I'll discuss a story that has absolutely appalled me. It turns out that more than 2/3 of pubs and boozers are giving us short measures in our pint glasses. This must stop. And moving on, immigration is, of course, a huge talking point in this general election campaign. And GB News can exclusively reveal that more than 10,000 Channel migrants have now crossed illegally to the UK so far this year alone. Well, GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White is in Dover. Mark.
Well, that 10,000 total is a landmark figure, 10,036 to be exact. It was reached today as 3 small boats made the crossing from France. The first of those small boats was spotted in the water just after dawn. The Dover lifeboat picked up 43 migrants and took them here to the Border Force Central Processing Centre at Dover Harbour. Then a couple of hours later, the Border Force vessel Defender took another 45 migrants from another small boat that was spotted in the channel. Then that third small boat was spotted just before lunchtime and 66 people brought here to Dover Harbour. 154 in total today, and there's no doubt that this 10,036 figure will be very unwelcome as far as the government is concerned and its central message of stopping the boats. Last year, the government was able to say that they'd managed to see a 36% reduction in the number of migrants crossing the English Channel. This year, that has been effectively reversed, with 35% up on where we were at the same point last year with that 10,036 figure. It was about 7,600 at this point last year. One of the advantages, I think, for Rishi Sunak in clearly going to the electorate on the 4th of July is that we won't see the real summer surge that we get towards the end of July, August and then into September, where on a really calm day across the English Channel you can see sometimes more than 1,000 people crossing on a single day. And that would have been a very difficult sell, to go to the country after a bumper year of arrivals and try to tell the electorate that your small boats plan was working. So at least by going on the 4th of July, the worst of the summer surge can be avoided.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm now joined by the immigration lawyer, Paul Turner. Paul, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. So 10,000 this year alone, heading for a record-breaking year on small boats. We've seen a huge number of asylum seekers admitted, 84,425 in 2023, another record. The Prime Minister admitted on the first day of the general election campaign yesterday that not a single flight is likely to take off before the next general election. Paul, let's face it, the lunatics have taken over our asylum system. It's completely unfit for purpose.
I would completely agree, Martin. It seems that the lunatics have been running the asylum system for quite a while now. It is quite disturbing that we've got to 10,000 already. I think that if the weather continues to be good, then we are likely to see a record number of crossings, which does give the lie. And I remember speaking about this only a couple of weeks ago, after various ministers were saying that the Rwanda plan was working because it was acting as a deterrent and because some people were moving around in Ireland. Sadly, it seems to be that it's not working at all.
So what's the answer to all of this, Paul? We scratch our heads in wonderment all the time at these figures, these dizzying heights we seem to reach. Do you think the Labour Party has any answers? What is the solution?
The solution is going to be, I think, quite unpalatable for some people, which is we've already spent, or we will have committed to spending £500 million to Rwanda, and I don't think we'll see much of that money back. But the only way, and this is the unpalatable truth, is that they're going to have to start processing the asylum claims in the United Kingdom. Now, there's a problem because there are about 40, maybe 45,000 asylum seekers that have arrived on small boats and have had their claims deemed inadmissible, and therefore they haven't been processed, and they're clogging up hotels at the taxpayers' expense. Now, what I think is going to happen is when the Labour government, if a Labour government is elected, is that they're going to have what will be seen as an amnesty, and those 40,000 people and whoever make it over the channel in the summer are going to have their claims processed. The problem is that the Home Office are then going to need further funding and additional staff. Otherwise, we're going to end up where we were, I think, last year when Rishi Sunak was talking about clearing a backlog. And the only way out of a backlog is to have an amnesty.
But Paul, that would simply roll out the red carpet to those on the beaches of France. It would roll out the red carpet to the business model of the human traffickers to say you'll be processed in Britain when we have such a pitiful rate of deportation and return. It's like 1.3% of people who arrived by small boats from 2018 to June 2023 were returned from the UK during that period. With odds like that, people will continue to make these life-endangering crossings because they're simply never likely to be returned. And to process them in Britain, to process them quicker, it means more people stay here, surely.
Well, yes and no. Yes, I completely agree with what you're saying, is that it seems to me that sadly the criminals that do the people trafficking have a better grip of reality than some of the politicians, because they will be marketing their product, evil as it is, on the basis that there's no real chance of you ever being removed. And once there is an amnesty and then the people are taken into the system and Rwanda ceases to be a threat. And I think it's only fair to say that I have had other people contacting me, and I'm aware of other practitioners who have been contacted by people who were frightened that they would be removed to Rwanda and were scared. Now that fear is just going to evaporate. And then we are, as you say, going to be left with a huge number of people whose claims need to be processed. And that's going to lead to bottlenecks. It's going to lead to a lot of problems. And the real answer is a huge amount of money and to effect some proper way of a returns agreement with countries. The government succeeded with Albania, and I'm puzzled as to they haven't made such a big fuss about it, because once they got their returns agreement with Albania, and once young Albanian men knew that there was a good chance of them being returned, they stopped coming. They went elsewhere.
OK, Paul Turner, we have to leave it there. It's always a delight to have your company on the show. Thank you for joining us. And there's loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. And I'll be joined live by a government minister and a member of the Shadow Cabinet. But first, it's time for your headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Martin. 4:30, our top stories. The Prime Minister says the lowering of the energy price cap shows his plan is working, as both Labour and the Tories look to make it an electoral dividing line. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland and claimed that the economy has turned a corner. He criticised the cost of Labour's net zero pledges and said that he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Conservatives plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today we've had the news that energy bills are falling again and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Labour has confirmed it will pass the smoking ban if the party enters office, with the Conservatives having run out of time to get it through Parliament themselves. The Labour leader has been campaigning in Scotland today, where he's pledged to bring down energy costs with a new publicly owned green power company. Labour's hoping to win dozens of seats in Scotland after years of dominance by the SNP. GB News can reveal that more than 10,000 migrants have illegally crossed the Channel to the United Kingdom this year. It's a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning, after he'd promised that his government would stop the boats. And the documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film, Super Size Me, in 2004, which tracked his health while he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. The film was credited with prompting a broad conversation about how fast food and rising obesity was impacting society. Mr. Spurlock passed away in New York due to complications from cancer. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Ray. Now there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you, I'm Jules Buckley. There's some queues on the northbound M1 though. Firstly, before the M18 interchange, junction 32, a 6-mile queue back to junction 30. It's at the scene of an accident that's now on the hard shoulder. Also northbound from 40 at Ossett up to Cargate at 41. That journey takes about 20 minutes, a 4-mile queue. 2 lanes are shut again, a collision being recovered there. Long queues for the northbound M11 just after junction 6 for the M25. Queuing back to Loughton, junction 5 not helped by an earlier collision. Delays back to junction 28 on the M25 as a result. And queues for the M4 in South Wales, westbound slow, junction 23A to the Bringlass Tunnels, a queue eastbound too, and queuing to either side of junction 41 at Bagland, westbound slow, back to junction 39. That's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to me to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
Well, that has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
Welcome back. The time is 4:36. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, just after 5 o'clock, I'll be joined here in the studio by the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. And among the things I'll ask him is this: does he think his party will have any MPs after the general election? Now, the ex-Post Office boss, Paula Venables, has denied the company's executive team, which she led, shielded the board from dirty laundry. Well, that's as she also denied trying to close down a review into the software, which led to the wrongful convictions of hundreds of sub-postmasters. I'm joined now by the Business and Trade Minister, Kevin Hollingray. Kevin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Now, before we move on to the general election trail and all the latest, let's talk a little bit about Paula Venables' performance this week. She turned on the waterworks. A lot of people are saying, as far as that goes, the sympathy is in the post. Can you hear me? You can't hear me. Yeah, good.
I thought you were going to play a clip by Paula Venables.
Well, I mean, I've watched that evidence she's been giving to the inquiry. I think it is ever more clear that the people at the top of the post office knew what was going on as early, 10, 12 years ago, 2013. And, you've got to ask yourself why that wasn't disclosed to the courts. But that'll be a matter for, obviously, if there's been something like perverting the course of justice. We know the Metropolitan Police have got an investigation into this, and the Crown Prosecution Service are there to assist them in taking forward charges where prosecutions can be taken forward. And I said for some months, I think I would welcome any charges brought forward. This has been a horrendous scandal, £1 billion of costs to the taxpayer in terms of compensation, countless lives ruined, divorces, suicides, homelessness, absolutely horrendous what's happened, and somebody needs to be held to account for it.
This week, of course, and the evidence that came out was the allegation that she knew about this. Do you think in all likelihood that must have been the case? I mean, she was the head honcho, she was in charge, all of this happened on her watch. Is it conceivable that all of this could have been going on without her knowledge?
Well, I don't think that's a question for me. I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on that, any specific person. But it's quite clear that people in the post office knew what was happening, knew there were flaws with Horizon, didn't disclose that, and knew those flaws could have been, if they'd been known about by the courts, it may well have been those people would not have been convicted, and that is horrendous. And that's why we decided to do what we've done only this week. With the Prime Minister's support, we have overturned hundreds of convictions, probably around 700 convictions with the legislation we passed yesterday, which will receive royal assent today. That means all those convictions, hundreds of them, around 700, will be quashed as of today, which I think many people will welcome. And of course, that means compensation can flow rapidly to those people and their families.
Yeah, and that's been a swift resolution, along with the tainted blood scandal. I was with people who've been in that inquiry today, and they were actually very, very happy with the political response to that, so well done on that front too. Can I now talk to you about the general election campaign? A grim tally has been reached today. 76 Conservative MPs now won't stand at the next election. This surpasses the record set in 1997. That begs the next question, Kevin. Does that mean the Conservatives are, with an echo of history, heading for a Tony Blair-style wipeout?
No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think you can connect those two things. I mean, if you see Greg Clark today, for example, he's served nearly 20 years in Parliament. That's a long time in Parliament. And John Redwood, 27 years. We have a lot of Conservative MPs, of course. So as a proportion, you're bound to get quite a high number decide that they've got other things to do with their lives. And I quite understand that. But we're really looking forward to working with a new cohort of Conservative members of Parliament who will bring a fresh approach to Parliament, and that will be welcomed.
And Kevin, would you like to see one of those new members of Parliament, perhaps Lord Frost, Mr Brexit, who we heard earlier on today was allegedly being blocked from the candidates list? Mr Rishi Sunak said to us today that's not the case. Would you like to see people like him in government, proper Tories with a record of delivering on things like Brexit?
Well, I definitely want to see proper Tories, and a great admirer of Lord Frost, David Frost. And if the relevant association thinks he's the right person to represent their constituency, so be it. We need all the talent right across. It's a very broad church in the Conservative Party. We need all the talent and all our best people on the pitch.
Good stuff. That's a great endorsement there. Kevin Holland-Rake, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you. So that's the Conservative Party's viewpoint. Well, in a few minutes, I'll be joined live by Shadow Cabinet member Peter Kyle. I'll ask him if he's worried that Jeremy Corbyn is going to beat Labour at the general election in Islington North. What a world we live in. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay rather cloudy, and it's going to be quite a cold night tonight as well, particularly compared to recent nights. Drizzly rain is going to continue across northern areas. That's because low pressure is still nearby and a weather front, but through this evening that low pressure will gradually shift north and westwards, taking with it that cloudier and slightly wetter weather and introducing much clearer weather. The clearer skies from the south this afternoon will spread northwards, and that will allow for temperatures to dip down into single figures, possibly low single figures across southern counties. There could also be some mist and fog around as well first thing, but also quite a good deal of sunshine as well. Saturday is looking like the driest day of the weekend and the warmest one as well. So fairly bright start across the far north of Scotland. Still some lingering rain across the northwest and the southwest probably, but for most of us it should be dry, if not a bit cloudy, across northern areas. Across northern England, much of Wales and England, it should be a bright start. Temperatures will pick up quite quickly as the sun comes up, so you'll be into double digits at least by around 8 o'clock, and there'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning. That mist and fog should clear quite quickly. There's a potential for a few showers to develop, particularly across northern areas of England, parts of Scotland as well. Could see some heavier showers on Saturday, but most of us should stay dry. And there's just a chance of some rain clipping the far southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees in the south into the high teens across the north. But there is a bit of a change on the way for Sunday, as this area of rain from the southwest will push northeastwards through the night, bringing a spell of wet weather. And once it does clear through, we will see plenty of showers breaking out across the country through Sunday and Monday. These could be quite heavy, possibly thundery, so it's going to turn much more unsettled and a little bit cooler for the rest of the weekend.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:44. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now let's get more now ahead of the general election. And Sir Keir Starmer's been in Scotland today promoting Labour's plans for a new body called Great British Energy, which he says would bring down household bills for good. At the same time, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has revealed that he will stand as an independent candidate on July the 4th after he was expelled from the party. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined in the studio by the Shadow Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, Peter Kyle. Peter, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
We've got to start with Jeremy Corbyn. He's the problem that won't go away. Of course, he wasn't kicked out of the party entirely for the shame he brought upon the party. He was actually investigated for allegations of racism by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. That wasn't enough to get him kicked out of the party, but only now has the party acted because he's standing against you.
Keir Starmer prevented him from standing as a Labour MP. As soon as the EHRC report came back and Jeremy refused to endorse it, then he was removed from the Parliamentary Labour Party and he's not sat since. This was nothing shows just how stridently Keir Starmer has worked to change the Labour Party. So now we are a changed Labour Party that is fit for service once again. And the fact that Jeremy Corbyn is standing against Labour tells everybody what you need to know. The Labour Party has changed, and we have a fantastic candidate there in Islington North, and then we will, we'll fight hard, and I'm pretty sure we're going to win it too.
But Keir Starmer did back Jeremy Corbyn twice to be Prime Minister.
Keir Starmer, let's just be honest about this. Keir Starmer did what it took to save the Labour Party, to fix the Labour Party and get it fit for service, and he's done all of those things. We are standing here now in an election facing the future. The country has a choice. We have a Prime Minister that says he has a plan but can't even get an umbrella when he makes the announcement of a general election. I mean, what does that tell you about his ability to deliver and to act strategically? And we have Keir Starmer that has rigorously changed the Labour Party, come forward with 6 steps forward that we will immediately act on, starting with a stable economy and then going right the way through our public services and, of course, the plan to set up a border security force so that we can tackle the small boats challenge. So this is a set of first steps forward that the country can look forward to, because comprehensively it adds up to not just a step forward for our country, it will profoundly change people's lives.
All right, can you tell us about the Great British Energy Plan? Because we can't find any detail. It's great to say your bills will go down. Who doesn't want that? But how? We've got the Conservative Party today saying they're going to scrap net zero taxes, green taxes. Ed Miliband's idea, and he's shortly to return to Parliament. Can we really trust the Labour Party on things like green taxation? I mean, you've done a U-turn on that £18 billion cost of it already, and the net factor is the working class, the working poor, they're the ones who are hit the hardest by these punitive green taxes.
So Great British Energy is one of those 6 steps forward that we will take immediately should we win the election in 6 weeks' time. What we'll do is set up a publicly owned energy company that will invest in clean energy. So this means that we can have finally a publicly owned body of significance that can invest in the transition and the new jobs of the future, that can support British innovation. So Keir announced this today up in Scotland with Anna Sarwar, the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. The key thing about that is that all of the wind farms that are being built and have been built over the last 14 years in Scotland, not one of them has any materials in it that was built and created in Britain. We need to make sure the United Kingdom is investing in itself. So we will have a British energy company, nationally owned, investing in clean British energy, and by doing so, we will bring down bills, but not just invest like Rishi Sunak did to artificially reduce bills for a short amount of time. We will reduce bills permanently going forward by lowering the permanent cost of energy for our country. It is a win-win for our country.
That could also be achieved if we exploited domestic resources, not just wind, and there's a lot of hot air in politics, as we all know. Shale, North Sea oil. So Keir Starmer's attitude towards North Sea seems to be just stop oil.
Well, the cheapest form of electricity right now is wind power. So we need to make... And the reason we don't have more of it is because the Conservatives launched 3 planning bills and didn't get one single one of them through Parliament. So we've had this kind of hiatus in building clean power for our country. We need to see where the energy market is going. We need a mixed balance of energy. We need to invest in new nuclear, which we will do. We need to make sure that we get clean energy off the ground, so with new renewables for solar and for wind. We need to invest in people's households so we can get the energy bills down that way, because we have an incredibly poor housing stock in our country, and we need to invest in that as well. Now, GB Energy will invest in all of these things, and it will take a holistic approach right across the board. But crucially, we will also be investing in the new jobs of the future. You know, those energy producing ways that you just mentioned a minute ago, from shale gas through to North Sea oil, you know, this is not the future. You know, Britain needs to start facing the future and grabbing the opportunities of the future. That's why we're so excited about this election, because we've got a chance to reorientate our country to where the skills are going to be, the jobs are going to be, the wealth creation is going to be for the future. Rishi Sunak is just niggling at the sidelines. He is facing and investing in the industries of the past. If we can harness the industries of the future, support the innovation where it is, not only do we solve the challenges domestically, we create great export opportunities for our economy and our innovators and our wealth creators and the businesses up and down our country. This is the opportunity we have, and then we only have now a few weeks to decide whether we choose the change our country needs.
Well, Peter Carl, you're plugged in and full of energy. Thanks for joining us in the studio. A delight to have your company. Please come back. Now it's the 80th anniversary of D-Day in less than 2 weeks, and the Commonwealth War Graves Commission is continuing its Lighting Their Legacy torch events in Harrogate today. School children have been hearing from historians and veterans on the importance of commemoration. And joining me now is GB News' Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley. Anna, sounds like a magnificent project, a magnificent day. Tell us more.
Good afternoon, Martin. Yes, it certainly is. We're here at Stonefall Cemetery, where the Lighting Their Legacy event took place. This is a Commonwealth War Graves area, one of the largest in the north of England, with over 1,000 Commonwealth War Graves from people from Australia, from New Zealand, America, Canada, and this event is all about passing on the legacy of D-Day to the younger generation. So Ken Cook, one of the last remaining Yorkshire D-Day veterans, was here to speak to local primary school children about his time in D-Day, and this is what he had to say.
What was it like? Now,
there's loads of explanations of what it was like. For some, it was terrible. For some, it was an adventure. For me, it was that kind of adventure, like a Boy Scout adventure. Never been on a beach before. Never seen a ship before. Because I was born in a mining village in Nottinghamshire, nowhere near the coast where I could go to go on a beach or whatever. And I never seen a ship or a boat, even a rowing boat I never seen. So all this was brand new to me. It was, exciting in a way, but otherwise, it's just something that happened. I was there, and in my mind, it was an adventure.
Ken was just 18 years old when he was conscripted to join the army, and he did his training in nearby Richmond. So he was giving his account to younger people and passing on that legacy to them. He is one of the few surviving D-Day veterans that will be going over to Normandy on June the 6th, and they will be taking that torch with them that they've been lighting around the UK across on the ferry to Normandy for that very important and special service that will be held.
And magnificent is that. Ken Cook, the very, very finest generation. And of course, we'll have massive coverage of D-Day 80th anniversary coming up on the channel throughout. Fantastic stuff. Now, don't go anywhere because there's lots more general election coverage coming up. In a few minutes' time, I'll be joined by the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, after this week's dramatic event with Nigel Farage pulling out of the party. I'll be asking him, is the party over? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now it's your weather, and it's Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay rather cloudy, and it's going to be quite a cold night tonight as well, particularly compared to recent nights. Drizzly rain is going to continue across northern areas. That's because low pressure is still nearby and a weather front, but through this evening that low pressure will gradually shift north and westwards, taking with it that cloudier and slightly wetter weather and introducing much clearer weather. The clearer skies from the south this afternoon will spread northwards, and that will allow for temperatures to dip down into single figures, possibly low single figures across southern counties. There could also be some mist and fog around as well first thing, but also quite a good deal of sunshine as well. Saturday is looking like the driest day of the weekend and the warmest one as well. So fairly bright start across the far north of Scotland. Still some lingering rain across the northwest and the southwest probably, but for most of us it should be dry, if not a bit cloudy, across northern areas. Across northern England, much of Wales and England, it should be a bright start. Temperatures will pick up quite quickly as the sun comes up, so you'll be into double digits at least by around 8 o'clock, and there'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning. That mist and fog should clear quite quickly. There's a potential for a few showers to develop, particularly across northern areas of England. Parts of Scotland as well could see some heavier showers on Saturday, but most of us should stay dry, and there's just a chance of some rain clipping the far southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees in the south, into the high teens across the north. But there is a bit of a change on the way for Sunday, as this area of rain from the southwest will push northeastwards through the night, bringing a spell of wet weather. And once it does clear through, we will see plenty of showers breaking out across the country through Sunday and Monday. These could be quite heavy, possibly thundery, so it's going to turn much more unsettled and a little bit cooler for the rest of the weekend.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jules Buckley. 3 issues on the northbound M1. Firstly, lane 1's coned off before the M18 junction 32 slow going. It's at the scene of a previous accident. Also northbound, there's a 4-mile queue as a collision gets recovered. Now 2 lanes are shut. That's Ossett junction 40 up to Cargate 41. And there's a breakdown northbound up the M1. It's from Hemel Hempstead junction 8 up to Redbourne at 9. That's causing queues. A lane closure remains in place. Northbound M11 queuing after junction 6, the M25, very slow back to Loughton at 5. Again, that follows a previous bump, but all lanes are back open. Slow back towards 28 on the M25, and the M4 in South Wales really slow either side of the Brynglas tunnels, and is currently queuing too on the M4 either side of junction 41 at Baglan. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking? Not a line, I never won a penny in my life. I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocked me. This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Hey, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, with Sir John Redwood and Bionic MP Craig McKinley, the latest Tories to bow out of the general election. The tally of Tory stand-downs is now 76, and that's beating the record of 1997. Does this signify a Blair-style wipeout for Rishi Sunak? And yesterday, Reform's honorary president, Nigel Farage, stood down after Rishi Sunak outmanoeuvred him by calling a snap early general election. Now, with their talismanic leader heading to America to help Donald Trump, is the party over for Reform UK? Well, I'll be joined by their leader, Richard Tice, in just a few moments' time. And a sobering new Trading Standard report has discovered that underfilled pint glasses and wine cost British drinkers a staggering £114 each every year. Now, purely in the name of research, I'll be sending a reporter to a Great British boozer to demand top-ups for the great British nation. That's all coming up in your next hour. A chaotic week in politics. Rishi Sunak, 76 now, have stood down and will not stand for the Conservative Party at the next general election. That surpasses the Tony Blair tally 1997, a grim landmark reached. Meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn is set to stand against the Labour Party, a former leader, the Sir Keir Starmer, endorsed twice. And also, as we're about to talk about quite soon, Richard Tice is going to join me from Reform. Nigel Farage admitted in this studio last night that Rishi Sunak had outmanoeuvred him by by calling an early election. Now, Farage isn't going to stand as a candidate. He will, however, commit to campaigning, but is going to America to help Donald Trump. I'll be asking Richard Tice, is the party over for Reform UK? That's coming up in your next hour. But first, get in touch. And it's gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch. It's your show. But first, it's your headlines. And it's Ray Addison.
Martin, thanks. 2 minutes past 5. Top stories this hour. The Prime Minister says the lowering of the energy price cap shows his plan is working, as both Labour and the Conservatives look to make it an electoral dividing line. Rishi Sunak completed his tour of the nation in Northern Ireland and claimed that the economy has turned a corner. He then criticised the cost of Labour's net zero pledges and said that he'll be telling voters over the next few weeks how the Tories plan to secure Britain's future.
Inflation has fallen back to normal levels. The economy grew faster than all our competitors at the beginning of this year. Today we've had the news that energy bills are falling again and wages have been rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And that's why it's the right time to turn to the future. And the world is sadly a more uncertain place than it's been in decades. And that's why what the country needs is leadership that can provide bold action and that has a clear plan, because that's how we will deliver a secure future for everyone in our country.
Theresa May has urged Tory MPs to fight to re-elect a Conservative government in her farewell speech in Parliament. The MP for Maidenhead, who served as PM between 2016 and 2019, said it would be a great wrench to leave the Commons after 27 years. Her departure comes as 76 Tory MPs stepped down, which is more than the number of those who left when Labour swept to power back in 1997. Well, Labour has ruled out any deals with the SNP after the election, even in the event of a hung parliament. Sir Keir Starmer has been campaigning in the east of Glasgow today, which is one of the seats that he's hoping to take from John Swinney's party in July's election. Sir Keir said the SNP's only ambition is to break up the UK, and there would be absolutely no deal with the Scottish nationalists. Jeremy Corbyn has confirmed that he'll stand as an independent candidate in this general election against the party that he once led. As a result, he's automatically been expelled as a member of Labour, which suspended him back in 2020 over his claims that complaints of anti-Semitism had been dramatically overstated in the party. The former Labour leader says he'll run as a voice for equality. But the current Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said he's not worried about Corbyn's popularity in Islington North, which he's represented since 1983.
Jeremy Corbyn will make his own decisions. I think he's standing as an independent. That's his choice. We will have an excellent Labour candidate in Islington North, as we've got excellent Labour candidates across the country. And the choice at this election is absolutely clear. We've had 14 years of chaos and decline under this Tory government. We cannot have more of that.
GB News can reveal that more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the United Kingdom so far this year. The milestone figure was reached today after another 154 people arrived in Dover, having crossed in 3 small boats this morning. It's a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning, after he'd promised that his government would stop the boats. The former boss of the Post Office has been accused of living in, quote, la-la land over her role in the Horizon scandal. Paula Venables again became emotional on her 3rd day of giving evidence. She admitted making mistakes and accepted that there was no one else to blame, but she did claim that she didn't know why important information hadn't reached her. Sam Stein KC described that as, quote, absolute rubbish, and suggested that Ms Venables had failed to ask the right questions because the risk was too great.
I worked as hard as I possibly could to deliver the best post office for the UK. It would have been wonderful to have 30,000 post office branches. That would have been the best outcome ever, to have had more post offices in more communities. What I failed to do, and I have made this clear previously, is I did not recognise and it's been discussed across the inquiry, the imbalance of power between the institution and the individual, and I let these people down.
And finally, the documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film Super Size Me in 2004, which tracked his health while he ate nothing but McDonald's for a month. The film was credited with prompting a broad conversation about how fast food and rising obesity was impacting society. Mr. Spurlock passed away in New York due to complications from cancer. Well, if you'd like all the latest headlines, you can sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Straight back to Martin.
Thank you, Ray. Now we start with the latest on a hugely dramatic day in politics. And Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that he is pumped for the general election campaign, but the same cannot be said for lots of his Conservative colleagues, because 76 Conservative MPs have now said that they will not be standing in the upcoming general election, which is more than in 1997 when Tony Blair's Labour stormed to victory. Well, GB News' political editor Christopher Hope has spent the day with Rishi Sunak, and he joins me now from the West Midlands. Welcome to the show, Chris. A dramatic day on the campaign trail. Can you start with the story we're hearing about? There was a pro-Palestine protest attempted to hijack Rishi's campaign. Can you tell us more?
On the motorway travelling arrival there was delayed somewhat by protest outside the building. There was a man, a pro-Palestine protester, playing Free Palestine. There were several people with Free Palestine banners and signs. There were school children milling around. But the PM, to his credit, said, no, I'm going to go along. He was rushed in by police. The crowd ran around, and there's some footage of this shortly to be played out on GB News. It was quite dramatic, and it shows, I think, the tenor of what we'll be seeing through this election campaign. As the Gaza situation bubbles along, we will see more and more of these protests, I expect, through the campaign against all the main party leaders. But to be the credit to the PM, there was an issue there. The police are worried, but the PM pushed through and did go and meet these six formers, although the visit was curtailed somewhat.
And Chris, do we have any idea of how many individuals were involved, what the potential threat was, and how close they got to the Prime Minister?
They certainly surged around the PM as he arrived. There was a long cavalcade of motorcyclists trying to keep the protesters away from the Prime Minister, but he surged towards him and he was ushered in very quickly, and the police then sat outside revving their engines while a man played very loud Free Palestine chanting music, rap music at the building, and school children milled around, and some people held signs, and some Labour supporters turned up. But the Labour supporters, I think, of the Labour region we're in, of the it was a bit tense for a bit, but it soon subsided.
Yeah, Chris, we see that footage on the screen now. Just having some difficulty with your signal. You, of course, are on the move with the Prime Minister's battle bus. That is a bunch of pro-Palestine protesters on the Prime Minister's trail there. They got very close to the Prime Minister. The police, to their credit, apparently got in quickly and puts paid to this, but gives something of a taste, perhaps, Chris Hope, of what we can expect on this campaign trail, these pro-Palestine protests seemingly touching every part of British culture.
That's right. We will see more and more of that, I think, as we go on. Of course, where the PM is at any one time in the country has to be a secret to ensure his security. And so when you're part of these groups travelling with the Prime Minister, we are told to keep his presence wherever he is a secret. He made very clear, though, on a flight back from Northern Ireland, we've been on a four-nation visit with the Prime Minister in 36 hours, travelling hundreds of miles by train, bus and plane. On the flight back from Belfast at lunchtime, he did and damn right he's going to win the general election. He has had some issues in Northern Ireland. He was interviewed in what's known as the Titanic quarter. Of course, the Titanic went down with 1,000 lives lost back in the early part of the 20th century. So all this is symbolic and difficult for him sometimes, but he's pushing on through. He thinks he can win the election. He thinks he can win from 20 points behind in the polls. But the problem he's got is some of his senior Tory MPs are quitting. We heard David Evannett. He became the record 76th Tory MP to leave, to quit at the election, beating the 75 record set in 1997. One of the 75th, in fact, was Craig McKinley, this rather brave and heroic Tory MP who has had his hands and feet amputated after contracting sepsis. We ran an important documentary about his recovery and his return to Parliament on Wednesday, when he was praised and cheered to the rafters by MPs from across the House of Commons in tribute to his public service. He's recognised that the timing of the election is wrong for him. He's got to get better. He's working on his health. He had planned to fight the election had it been in November, but a July election is just too soon for his condition.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that update live from the Conservative Party battle bus. Some may question the logic of attending the Titanic site. In a way, they may question the logic of not giving Rishi Sunak an umbrella on Wednesday. Thanks for that update there, Chris. And joining me now in the studio is the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, and GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Welcome to the show. Richard, it's been a tumultuous week for your party. Yesterday, the only topic in town...
It's been a great week.
Well, this week, the only topic in town yesterday was Nigel Farage being outmanoeuvred. He admitted in the studio. He admitted himself outmanoeuvred.
Nonsense. Actually, what he's confirmed is he's getting stuck in. Thrilled that he's able to campaign with us for the first time for the next 6 weeks. And I can tell you that it is going to be a busy period, and he is going to get fully all engaged, and we are going to be a serious part of ensuring this is an immigration election. And yesterday's figures, the mass migration figures, complete betrayal by the Tory party. I mean, catastrophic. It's one of the reasons, actually, why the Prime Minister bottled it, because he was petrified of the growth of Reform UK in the polls, petrified by the fact that he was sinking in the polls. The fact that he chose the Titanic to have an event in confirms, sadly, that he is sinking. And look, we're making progress. And the polls out today, since the announcement of the election, show that actually there's no post-election announcement Tory bounce. Exactly the opposite.
Richard,
the gap with us is closing.
Richard, never mind stopping the boats. Has Nigel leaving your ship stopped the vote?
He hasn't left our ship. He's joined our ship.
But the fact of the matter is, he said he would stand, and every pollster that we've had in the studio, every pollster worth their mettle, said a Reform Party with Nigel Farage, fully standing, fully engaged, will give you a 6-point boost. That hasn't happened. A lot of people yesterday were sending their messages into GB News saying they felt betrayed by Nigel for not doing this. Do you feel betrayed by Nigel Farage?
Of course not. I'm thrilled to bits that for the first time he's able to join the party fully and engage for the next 6 weeks. And that's absolutely great. And so, yeah, look, we're full on. And I think the reality is our press conference yesterday highlighting the complete betrayal, the mass immigration numbers. You've got a city the size of Birmingham arrived in 2023. They revised upwards the numbers from 2022. And we're going to make sure the British people understand that actually that mass immigration has huge extra pressure on housing rents that have increased by 20%, on wages being depressed, and also the pressure on our NHS. The whole healthcare system is being damaged by this mass immigration that no one planned for and no one voted for.
Well, the thing I don't really understand is Nigel Farage has said that he's not going to stand because he doesn't have time to find a winnable seat. He doesn't think he can win a seat. If Nigel Farage, the name that everyone knows, the name behind Reform, doesn't think he can win a seat, then what chance does any other Reform candidate have?
Oh, we're going to win seats, absolutely no question at all. And actually, what experience shows is sometimes it's more challenging if you're trying to both win a seat and run a national campaign than actually just focusing on one or the other. So, Nigel's got experience of that. And so, the conclusion was the right thing is campaign nationally, help us win some seats. And I'm very confident we're going to do that. In fact, I've already started to win bets. I said it would be a summer election, and sure enough, it's a summer election. Why? Because they're petrified of us. They know that Rwanda's not a deterrent, and Nigel's going to be a huge asset. And you're going to see that over the course of the next week.
But hasn't this early move, I mean, you know, in that very seat in this very studio last night, Nigel Farage said Rishi Sunak had outmanoeuvred him. By snapping the election early, it means there's not enough time to build the base, to fundraise, to get out there. And that's what the Brexit Party did so well before. You need that time to build your base, and that's been snatched away now by Sunak.
Well, it hasn't been snatched away at all. The reality is that there's always a bit of tease and a bit of banter, but the truth is we're making great progress. I'm thrilled to bits, and I think you're going to see over the next week, we are going to make sure people recognise this is an immigration election. It has so much impact on everything. We're pushing on hard, and I'm thrilled, onwards and upwards.
OK, so you like making bets. How many seats are you going to win? Let's make a bet.
I didn't say I'll bet on everything. I will bet we will get millions of votes, and the more people who vote for us, the more seats we get.
OK, super. Let's now throw to Chris Hope on the battle bus, and you were listening into that interview there. Chris, I wonder if you have any response or a question perhaps for Richard Tice back here in Westminster.
Yes, thank you. And Richard, hello from the Tory battle bus here in West Midlands. A quick question to you. Were you outmanoeuvred by this early call of election? If you were so certain on it being a summer election, why didn't you get a seat ready for your star candidate, Nigel Farage? Instead, he was caught short and he pulled out rather embarrassingly.
No, look, I disagree. There was no commitment that Nigel was definitely going to stand. You look at all options in any business, any walk of life, you look at a range of options and you decide what you want to do. And that's, you make judgments and you want to say what's the most effective way of achieving the objective. And this is not a one-election game. This is, we will get millions of votes at this election, and then this is a medium-term plan and journey towards the 28-29 election when we will be the opposition. The Tories might be in opposition, but we will become the opposition.
I mean, you're quite a small party still, obviously, but already there seems to be some division in your ranks. Yesterday, Nigel Farage said that he was planning on launching his election campaign next week. Today, Ben Habib said on GB News, that's your deputy co-chair, that Nigel Farage didn't plan to run next week. Ben Habib knew absolutely nothing about this, and he called it Nigel's version of events. How do you explain that?
The whole point is, if you're looking at thinking of something and you haven't confirmed it, you keep it within a very, very tight circle of information.
So tight that it's not even his deputy lead.
You keep it in a very tight circle.
OK, we have to leave it there. Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK. Thank you very much for joining us. Great sport here in Westminster. Now we get lots more on the general election campaign on our website, and thanks to you. GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got the breaking news and all the brilliant analysis you've come to expect from us here at GB News. Now it's the Great British Giveaway now, and your chance to win £20,000 cash in time for the summer. And, of course, it's all tax-free. What do you spend that wonga on? A dream holiday, or get the garden done, or perhaps even treat the family or the kids? Well, you have to hurry up as time is ticking on your chance to make it yours, and here's how.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, the average household could be more than £120 better off every year from next month. And our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, will fill us in on how. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
The Eurovision, according to figures out this morning, had its most disastrous night to date because viewing figures were down by 2.5 million.
So the BBC had a drag queen on telling everyone that she was boycotting it.
Who was boycotting it?
Someone called Crystal, who came on the Newsnight to say that she was boycotting her North London party because of Israel. So maybe that's why the figures are down.
They cancelled some Eurovision parties in gay bars in Soho.
Exactly. So I wonder whether that's what did it.
North
London party. I think the whole of Dalston basically not tuning in is what's caused this massive drop in ratings because of the whole controversy around Israel. I have to say, a lot of those performers needed to go and see a hygienist. I mean, that man who was the Irish entry, who's supposed to be a satanic witch. She does pop witchery or something.
She screeched.
And she screeched a lot, and then took her clothes off. Yeah. And then there was a sort of devil man who was gyrating around her, who obviously hadn't cleaned his teeth in years.
That was the vodka break.
Okay, fine.
That was the vodka break. When I went and got.
And I thought the Israeli entry. I mean, I didn't really like the song. I liked her dress.
But I just voted for it because
I thought the choreography was
I hated
awful.
the way she was besieged in a hotel room.
But I did also think that the Ukraine entry was quite interesting because I know that the Israeli entry got into trouble for referencing the October 7th attacks, and she had to sort of rewrite her stuff because you're not allowed to mention the war or anything like that, which is fine. But then the Ukraine entry was very war. I mean, they had kind of gunfire coming in over her.
The whole thing, there was double standards.
There was quite a lot of that,
I mean, the people outside, the queers of Palestine...
How are we going to carry on paying for it, though? Because, I mean, the BBC pays the lion's share of it. That's us. Yeah. And we do spectacularly badly every year.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 5:24 is your time. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, later this hour, I discuss a story that has absolutely appalled me to the pits of my stomach because it turns out more than 2/3 of pubs and boozers are giving us short measures in our pint pots. This must stop. Moving on, the average household could be more than £120 better off each year from July, and that's because Ofgem has lowered its price cap by 7%. And this comes as energy becomes the first battleground on the general election campaign, with Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer both pledging cheaper gas and lecky bills for voters. Well, GB News' business and economics editor Liam Halligan joins me now in the studio with On the Money. Liam, a double delight to have you twice on a Friday.
Spoiling you.
It's the economy, stupid, they all say, and we know that a huge driver where people are really feeling the pinch is in their energy costs. So let's start with the good news. There's a price cut from Ofgem.
There is. Obviously, this election campaign is going to be dominated by the economy, and within that, unusually, everyone's talking about energy prices. For years, people like me who've studied the energy sector closely, no one's been interested. It's just for nerds. But, of course, since war in Ukraine started properly escalated in February 2022, energy bills have been very, very high, and that's helped push up post-lockdown inflation. So you mentioned Ofgem. What's that? That's the energy sector regulator. They set a cap on the unit cost of electricity and gas combined, and households then benefit from that cap. Of course, if you use more gas and electricity, your bill's going to go above the numbers I'm about to say, but this is the average usage at the capped unit price. So let's have a look at some of the numbers, the scores on the doors. So the average gas and electricity bill, the average usage will be £1,568 a year from July, so says Ofgem. That's for 3 months, July, August and September. That's down 7% on the present energy price cap, which was April, May and June, and that means you're saving around 122 quid a year if you're the average household. Now, unfortunately, Martin, the cap is likely to rise again in October because wholesale gas and electricity prices are going up. There's still lots of geopolitical angst in the Middle East between Russia and Ukraine, which pushes up global prices. And let's keep this in perspective, because I've just said the average bill will be just over 1,500 quid a year. The average bill before the war in Ukraine, before February 2022, was just over £1,000 a year. So in other words, electricity bills and gas bills combined, even at this lower level, are still 50% higher than they were back at the beginning of 2022, before that ghastly escalation of war in Ukraine.
And of course, that is the thing that people care about, the pounds and the pence in their pockets. And you've been saying all along, and you're dead right, as usual, it hammers the working classes, the poorest, the hardest, because proportionately they fork out more on the essentials, energy and food.
That's right. If you're in a lower income household, you spend more of your income on food and energy. So food inflation and energy price inflation, which is where they've been the epicenter of this cost of living crisis, they disproportionately impact you, and that's a problem. And that's why energy prices are now going to be an election battleground. We had Claire Coutinho, the Energy Secretary, outgoing, if you like, from the Tories on the radio this morning, talking about scrapping the parts of our energy bills that go towards subsidising renewable companies that make wind turbines, that make solar farms and so on. That's a good idea because it's unfair to put those costs on bills because the poor pay more disproportionately. It should come out of general taxation if they're subsidised at all. Good idea. The Tories are now talking about it just before an election. Where have they been for the last 10 years? Anyway, that's up to them. Labour, in response, they've got their Great British Energy Company, nice slogan, lots of flags, the odd bulldog on a lead. But what does it really mean? I don't know, because there's no detail. So I'd like to give you a detailed analytical breakdown, Martin, which is what I do, of Labour's Great British Energy Company, and if it's going to be any good for GB News viewers and listeners. Alas, I can't, because there are no details. There's no meat on the bone. And this is what this election is going to be about. It's going to be about sloganeering, it's going to be about trading words, very little policy detail, because, frankly, so many journalists seem uninterested in the policy detail, even though it's what the punters really, really want to know. So this is how this election is going to pan out. Lots of finger-pointing about the economy, very little detail.
And I, in that very seat where you are, I had Peter Kyle. He's the Shadow Minister for Science earlier on. He was talking about this plan. And I said to him, so what is it? And apparently it's more wind farms, and that's cheaper. I said, well, what about shale? What about North Sea oil? Something that you've been talking about for ages, being energy sovereign. I pointed out Keir Starmer's policy seems to be to just stop oil. They seem tied to this dogged nature of net zero. And we all know, as you keep saying, that places more burden on the shoulders of those who can ill afford it.
Look, the North Sea, diminished as it is, it still accounts for about 70% of our energy needs. Not 70% of our electricity generation, but 70% of our energy needs if you include transport, oil and diesel and so on. The North Sea is still hugely important. Britain's energy complex. You know, go to Aberdeen and tell people in Aberdeen that oil and gas isn't important. You know, it's massively important for the Scottish economy, for the entire British economy, our energy complex. Even the Climate Change Commission, the government's own in-house sort of green conscience energy watchdog, says that even if we get to net zero by 2050, even if we do, on massively optimistic assumptions, even then we're still going to be using oil and gas for about 30 to 40% of our energy needs. So if we need oil and gas, let's use our own. And then we get the tax on that for our exchequer, for our schools and hospitals, and we don't have to spend lots of carbon, if you like, putting oil and gas on ships and importing it from around the world. So very little sense is spoken about energy, in my experience, by politicians, and I can't see that changing soon as this election campaign cranks up.
Liam Hannigan, always on the money, full of common sense. He'll never catch on. Thank you very much. Now, there's loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including the government explaining pornography and gaming for a surge in young men out of work. I'm meeting a man who's got a very different take on that theory. More on that very soon. But first, it's your latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
It's 5:31, our top stories. Rishi Sunak has been greeted by a group of pro-Palestine protesters as he visited a college in the West Midlands this afternoon. The situation was described as tense as the Prime Minister arrived at South Staffordshire College in Cannock. It's the last stop on his UK tour. Police officers formed a guard for Mr Sunak as his entry to the college was delayed and he was quickly ushered into the building as the crowd surged around him. Whilst inside, activists with banners and flags chanted "Free Palestine." Theresa May has urged Tory MPs to fight to re-elect a Conservative government in her farewell speech in Parliament. The MP for Maidenhead, who served as Prime Minister between 2016 and 2019, said it would be a great wrench to leave the Commons after 27 years. Her departure comes as 76 Tory MPs stepped down, which is more than the number of those who left when Labour swept power back in 1997. And the former boss of the Post Office has been accused of living in La La Land over her role in the Horizon scandal. Paula Venables again becoming emotional on her third day of giving evidence. She admitted making mistakes and accepted that there was no one else to blame, but she claimed that she didn't know why important information had not reached her. And finally, GB News can reveal that more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the United Kingdom so far this year. The milestone figure was reached today after another 154 arrived in Dover, having crossed in 3 small boats this morning. Now, it's a blow to Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning after he promised his government would stop the boats. OK, if you want the latest stories, you can sign up for GB News alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Bit of Friday finance for you now. The pound will buy you $1.2745 and €1.1744 euros. Price of gold, £1,833.23 per ounce. And the FTSE 100s closed the day at 8,317 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Ray. Now there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner with your latest travel news. Long queues heading north up the M1 through West Yorkshire, junction 40 to 41, near to Wakefield. It's the 2 left lanes of 4 that are closed. Recovery works underway following an accident. On the M6 heading south, just before Standish junction 27 in Greater Manchester, the left lane's closed, a van's broken down. Long delays heading south down the M1 through Northamptonshire from 17 to 16 towards Daventry. 2 outside lanes are blocked off where a lorry broke down. There's also an accident on that stretch. Queues on the M42 heading south through Warwickshire from junction 7 to 6 between the M6 and the Coventry exit. That's where lorries broken down, blocking the left lane. And on the Kent stretch of the M25, 2 lanes are shut clockwise just before junction 1B at Dartford at the scene of an accident of queues back over the Cuity Bridge into Essex. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
If she has such ambitions, where does this leave Prince Harry? I mean, he's obviously already resentful that he was treated as a spare back here in Britain. But he would only then become even more of a spare if he were married to either the president or somebody who was clearly setting her sights that way and taking various offices.
Yes, clearly this presents a problem for Harry, because if you notice what their plans are, and there's Meghan's lifestyle blog, American Riviera Orchard, an odd name, really rather ponderous. I think her PRs could have thought up something better. And then this Netflix program on cookery and entertainment and so forth. Harry is doing a series on polo, which is a bit of an elitist sport, actually. But of course, Harry has got Invictus. And so they have to, as they plan, Harry must, it must be absolutely definite that Harry will be integral to the planning. I mean, remember, he is very emotionally reliant on her, and therefore might be content in this context to be a spare, even if many people would laugh. But I certainly see, remember, you have to begin by hard campaigning. They're only putting in a each for other charity Archwell. If they really do want Meghan to go into politics, if that is her ambition, then I think she should make absolutely sure she's got the ground rules of how you do this in America. They've got to have a look at also whether they would wish to have their, or keep their titles in, even though they're in abeyance. This too is a problem. I mean, if you're really looking at a serious political career, I don't see it starting from what we know now.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:38. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, the government is blaming pornography and gaming for a surge in joblessness amongst young men. And figures from the ONS show there are 900,000 young people aged between 16 and 24 who are not in education, employment or training in January to March 2024. Well, joining me now is Vincent McGovern. He's the author of the book called The War on Dads and Children and a campaigner on men and boys issue. Vincent, welcome to the show. Absolutely delighted to have your company. So the report points a finger really at boys and it says they're losers. They're dropping out of the job market because they're watching porn and they're watching games. Does that idea have any merit or is there more to it?
Of course there is merit to it. But the underlying reason why so much of this is happening is willfully ignored. It is sickening to see deliberate discrimination being used against the most vulnerable members of society who are now far too often young men. In so many staples, they are bottom of the line. And they feel they have a hopeless future. A lot of them genuinely feel they have a hopeless future. It used to be that in the old days, until more recently, a father could expect to have 3 or 4 children in his lifetime, maybe looking after them, family. Now the average young man in working class areas may have 3 or 4 fathers in his lifetime. And he knows only too well that the entry to family courts, the narrative, the schools. I mean, the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, was recently talking about how boys as young as 4 should be taught about toxic masculinity. So from a very early age, they are told you're toxic, you're privileged. Yet all they're seeing is homeless men when they go anywhere, shopping centres or anything else. And if they go into a surgery, GP surgery or anything else, they see loads of posters about men are violent, violence by men, even though the greater killer of children are actually mothers, not fathers. But boys are discriminated.
And the facts are the facts. Boys are the bottom of education. They have been for over 20 straight years. They're the least likely to attend university. Therefore, it impacts their ability to earn. Therefore, is it any wonder they're dropping out of the job market or they're unable to compete? We've also seen immigration suppressing working class wages. If they don't have qualifications, the net result is they're getting left behind. And you feel they're being demonised. What can we do about this?
Well, there needs to be a desperate move away from the gendered ideology, the toxic discrimination against the male gender. It's deeply misandric. And that you need to have impartial professionalism among the services so that your guilt is not determined by gender, it's determined by action. You look at the courts, you look at the huge increased normalisation orders. They are just given willy-nilly with huge government-funded agencies assisting mothers removing fathers from children's lives.
And in education, I mean, I know from my own campaign, there's not a single campaign, not a single policy out there to help boys. They seem blind to the plight of young lads.
This is a deliberate blindness, and unfortunately I think it will become worse if Labour get in, because Keir Starmer originated the Believe the Victim, which quickly became Believe Only the Female, and the involvement, the parental involvement, is probably going to be removed as well in the next election.
You know, Keir Starmer isn't here to defend himself. We don't know for a fact that it will be worse under the Labour Party. It isn't great as it is. Let's face matters. OK, so in terms of you're about a systemic issue here. We've seen, for example, with the Post Office, we've seen with tainted blood, we've seen huge sectors ignored. Do we have a similar problem, do you think, in this area?
It is a bigger problem, because this is behind closed doors. At least the Post Office and the affected bloods, horrific though they were in open scrutiny and people could protest about them. But the whole situation, discrimination against boys, the family courts, particularly the gateway entries, which are so discriminatory against the male gender, that is the real problem that has to be addressed to benefit society, and particularly young boys, and to create a situation where Britain has not the worst in Europe, but head towards the best in Europe for young boys' futures and all of society and children's futures.
And we hear so often about toxic masculinity, but the work you've done in the past, positive male role models who don't get much of a thank in life, you know, active, involved fathers, your own story. You went to the European Union and fought to get fathers more involvement with their children because that has more positive outcomes in life.
There's no comparison between the EU average, the OECD nations and England. The UK is bottom of all international statistics on this. I mean, at the moment, 50% of children at the age of 15 aren't having a regular involvement with the non-resident parent, who is 95% fathers. You're on about working on employment and all the rest, and all the other factors. There is always employment in the working class areas for those who are unemployed. It's the dodgy work, it's the grey industries, it's the crime. That is where the real growth industry is in employment. It's not proper employment, of course. And then the vested interest, there's a huge increase in the prison population. They're now asking police to not arrest people quite often because they can't keep up with the prison population. So there's a perception among the younger men that you may as well, you're already toxic, you're already demonised, you've nothing to lose. Why try to engage with society that rejects you? You're second class.
Sobering words. Vincent McGovern, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. That's Vincent McGovern. Thanks for all your talk on that. Now, we've got to get something done about this, Vince. We've got to get something done about it. Something I care about passionately myself. Now, next up, are pubs killing our spirits ahead of the FA Cup final and the Scottish Cup final this weekend? Find out why shortly. They're shortchanging us. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay rather cloudy, and it's going to be quite a cold night tonight as well, particularly compared to recent nights. Drizzly rain is going to continue across northern areas. That's because low pressure is still nearby and a weather front, but through this evening that low pressure will gradually shift north and westwards, taking with it that cloudier and slightly wetter weather and introducing much clearer weather. The clearer skies from the south this afternoon will spread northwards, and that will allow for temperatures to dip down into single figures, possibly low single figures across southern counties. There could also be some mist and fog around as well first thing, but also quite a good deal of sunshine as well. Saturday is looking like the driest day of the weekend and the warmest one as well. So fairly bright start across the far north of Scotland. Still some lingering rain across the northwest and the southwest probably, but for most of us it should be dry, if not a bit cloudy, across northern areas. Across northern England, much of Wales and England, it should be a bright start. Temperatures will pick up quite quickly as the sun comes up, so you'll be into double digits at least by around 8 o'clock, and there'll be plenty of sunshine through the morning. That mist and fog should clear quite quickly. There's a potential for a few showers to develop, particularly across northern areas of England. Parts of Scotland as well could see some heavier showers on Saturday, but most of us should stay dry, and there's just a chance of some rain clipping the far southeast later on in the day. But in the sunshine, highs of around 22 degrees in the south into the high teens across the north. But there is a bit of a change on the way for Sunday, as this area of rain from the southwest will push northeastwards through the night, bringing a spell of wet weather. And once it does clear through, we will see plenty of showers breaking out across the country through Sunday and Monday. These could be quite heavy, possibly thundery, so it's going to turn much more unsettled and a little bit cooler for the rest of the weekend.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:47. We're on the final furlong of the week. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a story very close to my heart. Are pubs killing our spirits? Because punters are reportedly being overcharged around £114 every year by boozers who are short measuring our beer and our wine. Now, according to research by the Chartered Trading Standards Institute, 7 out of 10 drinks in British pubs are being poured short, with beer, the most likely drink, to be under-poured. This boils my blood. Let's speak now to GB News' West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who's at the Queen's Head pub in Birmingham. Jack, oh, you're making me very envious with your cold pint there, sat outside. But this is something that really, really bothers people. Beer's pricey enough as it is. If they're short-changing us, we've got a big problem.
Definitely. I mean, it's a shocking statistic, isn't it, really, Martin, to say, the 77 pubs that Trading Standards visited in this survey, 96 out of the 137, servings that they got from pints of beer and wine as well, 96 out, that's 70% were under measured and not really to the standard. I mean, the rules are that for a pint it should be 95% liquid, 5% maybe a bit of a head or some froth on top. I mean, the likes of Camera, of course, the Campaign for Real Ales argue that it should be 100% liquid and that shouldn't really count. But you're right. I mean, the price of a pint of beer has gone up 5.6% in the last year. That's according to the ONS. So it really is. People are already shortchanged enough, and now they're getting shortchanged even more when they're going to pubs and not maybe getting the specific measurement. Now, of course, I've been here at the Queen's Head in Birmingham. It's run by Davenport's Brewery, which is a local brewery based in Smethwick here in the city, and they've been teaching me how to pour the perfect pint. I mean, this is a pretty good example of a pint. I have had a little sip, so it's not as full as it was a little bit earlier on. But it's all, they were telling me, it's all about the technique, really, and that when you become a bartender in the first place, learning that technique of how to pour a proper pint, and it's maybe that standard that is lacking across some of the hospitality industry. But of course, we know as well, they'll be honest, that they are struggling with bills, with paying their own prices as well. So maybe that's a factor that comes into it. But while I start on this, Martin, why don't you take a look at what some of the great British public have been telling me in reaction to that survey?
How do I feel about it? Well, I think it's a shame, but I think it happens. I don't have the means of measuring my glass of wine when I buy it, do I? Exactly.
Does it shock you that pubs aren't maybe going to the full amount of a pint or a full amount of a kind of serving of wine?
No.
Why is that, though? Why are you not shocked, maybe?
Because I think there will be inaccuracies and they will tend to err on the side of economy from their point of view.
Well, it's not really good, is it, really? You want to go to a pub and you want your pint to top, you want it to be nice. It's not right, is it, really?
I mean, there's a lot of money apparently being wasted by people, a lot of pints in the process. It all adds up.
Well, I work at a pub myself, and there's a lot that gets put to waste, and, it's not really the best, really, so...
I mean, do you think, like, you know, how much kind of head are you looking for on a pint? Are you looking for a good kind of amount, or do you not?
You want about that much, really. You don't really want much more than that because it's going to ruin the pint. But they shouldn't be wasting it as much as they should, and we should be getting more.
If they don't put it the right measure, you say to them, "Can you top that up, please?" It's as simple as that. You don't stand for a lower pint than what's there.
I mean, have you seen it when you've been into a pub?
You see it all the time. Especially when a pub's busy, it's the first thing they'll do. They'll pour the pint, they're busy, they don't have time to top it up, so they just move on to the next customer. You simply wait there until the next bar staff's there and say, "Excuse me, would you mind topping this up?" And they're more than obliging.
Well, there you go, a bit of common sense from the British public there about how they want their pints to be right up to the top. I mean, we were talking, wasn't I, just there about, you know, how much, whether the head should be included in the pint, whether it should be 100% liquid and not just 95%. I mean, in part of this survey, 35% of people found that, of course, that, you know, it should be all the way to the top. But, you know, it's Friday afternoon, Martin. I've got to tuck in.
Yeah, Jack Carlson, I was just noting there how he did a bit of a Paul Daniels on that pint, made half of it disappear, just like that. You know, this is something that really, really bothers me, Jack, because if I go into a boozer and I get short measured, I always demand a little topperoonie. It's your right as a free Englishman, Scotsman. Go on.
Well, you know, this is it, Martin. I mean, when you go to a pub, you know, a lot of the time maybe it's busy, maybe you don't want to complain, of course, you know, to the bartender that's maybe not exactly to your liking. But of course, you know, at the end of the day, if you're paying for a pint, you know, you're paying for a pint. You know, you look at some of the stats, and actually, you know, you're losing about £1.70 a week if you don't, you know, ask them to get exactly what you're given for.
And it's astonishing, Jack. 86% of all beer ordered was short measured in this survey. Although on the bright side, Jack Carlson, that's the only time I cut down on my drinking. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always a delight. Now, I always ask for a top-up at the bar, always. In fact, I'll tell you this. Sometimes when they go to the till, I'll have a cheeky little tug on it. I'll put it back down and say, "Can you top that up, please?" Guilty as charged, but you should always ask for a top-up. It's your right. There's no point paying for fresh air. There's no point paying for froth. And they do try it on. Push back. When you push back, you do get your little top-up. Oh, anybody else getting very thirsty looking at that? Now, quickly. Got a load of emails sent in today from your says. Let's read out a couple now on the topic of migrants. Of course, the 10,000 mark was passed this year, a new record. Erica says this: how can it be right that everyone from anywhere can just decide to come to the UK and get looked after? What is the point of going through the legal channels at great cost? Why pay for passports? The UK, to me, feels like the Wild West now. Bruce adds this. You can see pictures there of those boats coming ashore. And of that, Bruce says this: I want to know why Border Force and the RNLI vessels are now providing a taxi service for these illegal immigrants. Now, the RNLI, Border Force, would say that is unfair. They're simply doing their job. But a lot of people do say that. And quickly, on general elections, Nikki says this: maybe the Tories should ask Reform to put candidates in the 75 seats where their MPs have quit, and then ask Reform for quid pro quo. Excellent stuff. Well, thanks for all of your opinions on the show. Thanks for getting in touch this week. It's been a huge week in politics. The general election broke on this show on Wednesday. I was proud to cover it. Hope I did a great job. I'll be back on Monday. I'll also be covering for Nigel Farage on Monday evening. Have a double whammy of me. Thanks for your company. Have a great weekend. And how's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. There will be some sunshine across southern areas to end the day, but for most of us it will stay